edition of CJ and CJ from the Basement. I'll be your captain this evening, CJ Massey, and to my left we have CJ Long.
Thanks for joining us on another episode, and on to another team today as we get ready to bring you the Cincinnati Bengals.
CJ, last season, before the Bengals season began, before the NFL season began, I made a prediction that would end up being completely false. What I said is that Marvin Lewis would be the first coach fired during the season. I didn't think he would make it even through the season. But after a 6-2 red-hot start in Cincinnati, I looked like a fool, and I'll admit to that. But the Bengals started off hot, as I mentioned, and they sputtered a little bit down the end. Towards the end of the playoff run, they did finish 9-7, came third in the division. They're in a tough division. They clinched a wild card spot where they faced the Houston Texans. Texans edged them out a little bit, but overall, it's a very successful season for the Bengals, and we saw the emergence of a awesome two-man punch between quarterback and wide receiver with Andy Dalton and A.J. Green. Dalton out of TCU, Green out of Georgia. They're first and second round picks last year, and they really have the Cincinnati faithful looking. They're really hopeful that this is going to be a great season for the Bengals. They're ready to eat their Skyline chili, watch the Bengals play, and they're hoping for another playoff run this year, CJ.
And I'll tell you, you mentioned the connection of Andy Dalton, to A.J. Green, and ironically enough, their passing game and running game, their offense, was one of the weak spots on the team. Their defense was really sensational, top 10 defense, both top 10 in categories of rushing and passing. So really all around a great defense, and they did nothing but get better in the offseason. You draft Drake Kirkpatrick, cornerback that's going to be shut down eventually, and you're going to return Leon Hall, who got injured in Week 10 last year with his Achilles heel, so he's going to get back hopefully by the beginning of training camp. Bengals fans are hoping he's going to be ready to go. So, look for the Bengals defense to come back just as strong. Their offensive line, another strength, top 4 in the NFL, 4th place, best offensive line, least amount of sacks. Just a great job by the Bengals offensive line, And once again, they did nothing but get better. They bring in Travell Wharton from the Panthers, who a lot of people know he's been a mainstay and a really consistent blocker. They also draft Kevin Zeitler with another first-round pick. And he's going to come in and be able to anchor their offensive line. The question, like we said, comes in with their offensive firepower. They tried to address some of that with their running game. They brought in Benjarvis Green-Ellis from New England. Now, we haven't seen him run the ball a whole lot. He's not going to be one of your power backs in the league from what we've seen. But, he's going to come in behind this offensive line and have a chance to show what he can do. The Bengals are definitely more of a run-heavy team than the Patriots were. So Benjarvis Green-Ellis, he's going to get his shot. So really the question is going to come in with their number 2 wide receiver spot. They've got Brandon Tate going after it, Muhammad Sanu, a draft pick, their 3rd-round draft pick. He's going to be competing for it. And, of course, you got A.J. Green as the number 1. So really it's going to come down to whether or not the Bengals can get it done with Andy Dalton on the offensive side of the football.
And if they do get it done, what's going to happen with the rest of the division? When you're in there with the Baltimore Ravens, we've already covered them. Pittsburgh Steelers, and we don't have to worry too much about the Cleveland Browns. But when you're in there with the Steelers, I think it's going to be the Steelers and Bengals right down there to the wire, especially if the offensive firepower for Cincinnati stays how it was, and Jay Gruden, who's a first-year offensive coordinator for the Bengals last year, who really was he was the leader of the whole Dalton to Green connection, and his playbook really opened up the offensive line and really allowed the Bengals to showcase what they could do with their young players. So with that said, Bengals, Steelers right there towards the end could be looking pretty good.
Oh, definitely. And one thing we don't want to have happen is fans to get their expectations set too high. But let's be honest, there's not going to be a team in this division that has a top 5 offense because the defenses in the division are just too good. One thing it's going to come down to is what defense can create the most turnovers and what offense can prevent the most turnovers from occurring. And Dalton did a pretty good job of that last year, 20 touchdowns to 13 interceptions. You'd like to see a bit of an increase, but from a rookie quarterback, he was pretty impressive in terms of his ball management. We really did never see him turn it over at crucial moments in the game very often. So that's definitely a plus, and he's only going to get better with that. We'll talk about Dalton and the rest of the Bengals team and a few answers to some questions that Bengals fans might have in the upcoming season next on Massey's Main Points.
From the basement. I'm your host CJ Massey alongside NFL analyst CJ Long. It's time for Massey's Main Points. First main point we're going to hit on tonight involves AJ Green, Andy Dalton. We mentioned them earlier, how spectacular their freshman seasons were. How about what can we expect out of their sophomore season in Cincinnati?
Just as much, if not more, to put it short and simple. Dalton, threw for 20 touchdowns on the year, only 13 picks, and in a large part, his performance was due to AJ Green. And of course, we saw Green get hurt later in the season, so those numbers could have been even bigger. So we'll see what happens in the upcoming season. But as we all know, if somebody comes in as a combination like that, Dalton to Green, and performs that well their rookie season, you can only expect it to get better. And like you said, with the offensive coordinator being there his first year in Gruden, look for him to be able to develop their relationship even more. Now, one big focus you want to see that's going to play a big factor in their performance is the performance of the number 2 wide receiver. We want to see somebody that can take the pressure off of AJ Green, because if they're not able to, we're likely to see a lot of double teams come Green's way, and then that could lessen the production a little bit. But if Brandon Tate can step up, Sanu, the rookie, can step up, then look for Green to have just as big of a year as last year.
That would be huge. There's no doubt about that, and the Bengals fans are expecting it. So the Bengals did such a great job drafting those guys last year, and that leads us into the next question. They had 10 picks in this year's draft, the Bengals did. And when it was all said and done, ESPN was giving out draft ratings, and the Bengals were amongst the top. So are those players going to come right in and perform right away, do you think?
I think the majority of them, of their top picks, will be able to. One question is going to be with Dre Kirkpatrick. The Bengals already have a cornerback field that's absolutely stacked. Terrence Newman over from the Cowboys. They got Leon Hall returning from injury, who he's a stud. And then, you've got Nate Clements, who's a veteran. He's always been consistent over his career. So Kirkpatrick coming in and stepping up right away, it's definitely going to be a challenge in training camp. Another wide receiver that the Bengals drafted is Sanu. This is the guy that at the draft received a prank phone call from who knows who, telling him he had been picked. He flips out, and then the Bengals come up and pick, and it's not Mohamed Sanu. Luckily for him, a few picks later, the Bengals picked him up, traded up, and got him at the draft. But just a really strange occurrence, so you feel for him a little bit, because that's got to be a terrible feeling. So if Sanu can come in out of Rutgers and step up big, and push Brandon Tate for that number 2 spot, possibly even take it away, he definitely has an opportunity to step up, because a lot of heat is going to be off of him and on to AJ Green.
Flipping to the other side of the ball, you mentioned the secondary. What can we expect out of the secondary this year? And is Leon Hall going to be okay from his injury, you think? He's looked good. He's looked good in his workouts. What do you think from him?
Hall definitely, they're saying right now, should be back at full strength, ready to completely participate by training camp. Right now, he's still a little bit restricted, but like you said, he looks good in his workouts, going towards training camp and moving forward. So he should be back at full strength. Like we said, with their stacked cornerback position, expect nothing different this year than last year. I mean, you're in a division with the Ravens. You know, none of them really have breakout wide receivers like a Brandon Marshall or a Calvin Johnson. You know, we've got Santonio Holmes, or excuse me, Mike Wallace with the Steelers, and then you've got the Browns, nobody, and then you've got the Ravens with Bolden, but you know, nothing too out there. So definitely look for the Bengals to be able to shut it down, and especially with their run game, with their run defense up front, being ranked in the top 10 in the NFL, gives the cornerbacks a little bit more of what to expect. You know, if the offense is all the time in 3rd and longs, well, you know, you can drop back into pass coverage, and when you've got good cornerbacks back there like the Bengals do, they're going to be able to dominate. So, you know, look for the same thing. Bengals fans coming into the upcoming year, a dominating defense in a division that is dominated by the defensive side of the ball.
Well, thank you very much, CJ, and thank you for joining us right here for Massey's Main Points. Stay tuned as we cover our Bud Light Bold predictions.
Bud Light presents Real American Heroes.
Real American heroes.
Today we salute you, Mr. Chinese food delivery guy.
Mr. Chinese food delivery guy.
Without you, we'd be forced to do the unthinkable when we wanted Chinese food. Drive to a restaurant.
A mushu got man.
But you, sir, bring it to us in under 20.
Ride like the wind.
Armed with your rickety bike, you battle traffic, bad weather, and the occasional busted elevator. And why do you do it? Because somewhere a guy is waiting for his Kung Pao crab puffs, and he's got $1.57 with your name on it.
That's 10%.
So crack open an ice cold Bud Light, oh mercenary of the Mandarin Chicken, and know that when America is looking for a man to get the job done, you do deliver.
You deliver.
Bud Light beer, as it was said.
CJ and CJ from the basement. Up next on the show is our Bud Light Bold predictions. For the Cincinnati Bengals, I'm going to start it off with basically something straight and to the point. The Bengals will make the playoffs in 2012.
I'm going to agree with you on that, and I'm going to take it one step further. Not only will they make the playoffs, but they will win the division. I'm going to say that the offense and defense are going to gel together this year, and they're not going to settle for a wild card berth like they did last season. They're going for it all, and they will top the Pittsburgh Steelers this season.
I tend to disagree a little bit there. I think they will make the playoffs as a wild card spot. I think the Steelers will just be a little bit too much for them, a little bit more consistent on the offensive side of the ball. But, of course, that remains to be seen. As we all know, last year, no one expected them to – they expected them to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. So anything can happen. You know, disagreement is always good, but we both agree on one thing. The Bengals will be in the playoffs in 2013 once they actually begin. Thanks for joining us on CJ and CJ from the Basement. Pick us up next time as we go over the Cleveland Browns.